Coming up, we kick off the official start of the 2023 season for Big Blue, taking a broad look, not just from some sleepers for the Giants this season, some fantasy outlook around the team and the league at large. Are there some upsets and some fun ways to make some money as we set up a big coverage week here on OGP? We dive in coming up next. Yes, sir. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, of course, I am one of your two hosts, Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast and your New Jersey Devils on the Devils Puck Luck podcast. Thanks for being a part of us here as we kick off the week of coverage for 2023, the big week one matchup with the Dallas Cowboys. And we're obviously, as I said at the top there, going to talk about some sleepers. You can see some names being listed here if you're watching over on YouTube, or hopefully you're subscribing and following the show. And there's going to be a lot of other guys that we're going to tap into here a little bit, as well as looking around the NFL at large. Going to get over on FanDuel, going to break down some, I think, divisional numbers that might make sense in terms of odds. And as I said last time, when we started saying teeing up some fantasy stuff, I'm going to be much more reserved this season. I'm not going to swing for 33-leg parlays, but we are going to have some fun with it as well. So this is the aperitif to what's going to be a great week of coverage, which will include, this is a heads up, Coach Ed, Coach G, you may know him as well. He is a fantastic X and O's breakdown coach that coached around New Jersey. So we got on with him earlier today, and over the course of the upcoming week, probably maybe tomorrow, also on Thursday, we're going to have some coverage taking a look not only at Deonte Banks and Trey Hawkins in the secondary, as it specifically relates to what we saw in camp, where they're going to need to work and grow, and how they're going to match up against Dallas when we think about taking a look at guys like CeeDee Lamb, when we talk about guys like Cooks, when we talk about guys like Gallup. What are going to be some of the wrinkles that they're going to have to work with and areas that we think that they can excel? That was a great conversation. And then we also flipped it over and talked about Evan Neal in year number 2 and Schmitz Jr. in his rookie season. Again, expectations, areas that Neal needs to improve, how these matchups could play out, and some things to watch for. So we're hoping to make this a little bit of a repeat process for us throughout the course of the season. So be sure to subscribe and be tuned in for those, because they're going to be a lot of fun. All right, some of the notes out of the way now. Let's talk a little bit about, because we haven't done this yet coming into this season. And I do find it fascinating, as we said, when we get down to the final 53 and where this roster stood, you look across that wide receiver room, and it's a fascinating one. Chief among them is the fact that we go from drafting Jalen Hyatt in the 3rd round and thinking, okay, we want him to come along slowly. We believe in him, but he's going to need to develop certain areas of his game. Then we get some really good sample sizes, both in practice and in training camp, and also in preseason, where the kid's speed is obviously electric. Some of those moves off the line look like they are going to be very effective in the upcoming season. And then we get this bonus wrinkle. Behind having Isaiah Hodgins returning, Darius Slayton returning, Paris Campbell getting brought in, and the addition of Darren Waller, all of a sudden Wan'Dale Robinson is ready to go. Or at a minimum, they're not going to put him on the PUP list to start the season. Whether or not he's ready to go week 1 right out of the gates, I am just putting some low-level excitement around him. He, to me, has a little bit of surprise factor when it comes to getting back into this season and coming off of that injury. It's easy now, with all the additions this offseason, to forget about the fact that this kid played in 6 games last year, had 23 catches on 31 targets, 227 yards, 9.9, nearly a first down per reception, and obviously had a touchdown in there as well. If healthy, if, I actually think when we pull back, we look at this roster and remind ourselves, this is a draft pick from this regime, right? Now, the injury concerns aside, at least for the moment, think about the Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson future as the New York Football Giants wide receivers, and maybe mitigate some of these things around where is Darius Slayton going to fit in, Paris Campbell in the short term, a 1-year contract, Sterling Shepard, the veteran, the face of this wide receiver room for so many years, also with his own concerns, also going to be over 30 years old. So I think it's going to be really fascinating and fun to watch how Wan'Dale Robinson looks once he finally gets onto the field, and whether or not we think that the Giants can really look at this new young nucleus and say, yeah, over the next draft or two, we're going to add another player in. Daniel Bellinger is a part of this too. And you start to create this tier inside of this roster where you say, here are the guys that we have high expectations for, at least a clear bar has been set with veterans. And then there's the rookies and the year number two guys that could be 2 seasons from now, all of the players that we talk about having massive impact. So I'm really excited to watch for how Robinson looks when he gets on the field. Player number 2 for me is Eric Gray. We go back to this and talk about how we understand that Saquon Barkley is going to be the key pivotal figure in the backfield. No two ways about it. And that's not just from a running standpoint, it's also from a receiving standpoint. But the other thing that we talked about in the loss of Jashaun Corbin, tried to get him through maybe to waivers into the practice squad. He departs and look for another opportunity to break through on an NFL roster. We understand why Matt Breida is here. We understand what his function is and the safety net that he represents. However, I will not be surprised if Eric Gray claims a role behind Saquon Barkley that to this point nobody else has been able to do. Right? Year over year, there's some different players that come and go. We remember, by the way, that you go back and you think about Matt Breida and the fact that when you look at his stats, you can say, wow, played in 17 games, 54 carries, 220 yards. Okay. Receiving 17 games played, 20 receptions on 25 targets, only 118 yards. But boy, that's exciting until you remind yourself that it was in that final game, last 2 games, I should say, of the year against the Colts, where he had 9 carries, 59 yards, 4 for 28 in the final game of the season. And then you can also think about the receiving numbers, where in that last game alone, 7 catches on 8 targets for 12 yards. So a lot of that work, right? 13 of his carries and 8 of his catches came in the final 2 weeks of the season, where they weren't as significant or meaningful as you may have wanted them to be. Now, he did show up in both playoff games, though only 3 for 8 in the first game, 4 for 23 in the second. I just think that Eric Gray, in connection with moving off of Corbin, they didn't bring anybody else in. You have special teams value in Gary Brightwell. Pardon me for the glitch there. I had a little hiccup there. Gary Brightwell has never been necessarily someone that we think about as being a key contributor on the offensive side. And maybe he'll have a slightly bigger role. But the confidence that I think the Giants are showing what Eric Gray can be and what he showed us in training camp and preseason gets me excited about watching how things unfold early in the year. There's some guys that you don't earmark to be key contributors early. I think Gray, week over week, could be a really fun one to watch. Then we flip it to a veteran name in one Leonard Williams. Now, you'll hear us talk a little bit, Coach G and I, Coach Ed, whichever one you want to go with, about Leonard Williams and just his impact. We talk about pressures, and we know it's a big contract. Maybe there'll be something here, and we're going to discuss in segment number 2 the Daniel Jones adjustment to his contract and what that meant for the team from a cap standpoint. But Leonard Williams, I think this upcoming season, if you look across that defensive front, right? Kayvon Thibodeau in year number 2, hopefully another healthy year for Azeez Ojulari, Dexter Lawrence in there. We talked about bringing in additional backup and an additional depth here across that defensive front as well, something that we lacked in years prior. All of these things, when we think defensively, Robinson, also bringing in Nunez Roche in there as well. And even the mystery package that could be Isaiah Simmons, right? Plus a late round pick in Jordan Riley, who at least looks poised to have a role. All of this, though, speaks to, in addition to the secondary, the system in another year, it's just there's a world where those pressures, which are good, and we talked about how those still matter sometimes as much as sacks, despite the way fans can sometimes look at it, and there's that frustration of not getting home. I think that you could see him have one of his best seasons from a production standpoint in key statistical categories, because this is the deepest version that we've had across that defensive front in a number of seasons. And just being able to keep him not only keep some other bodies occupying when he's on the field, but then also being able to get him some rest reps so that when he is there, it's the most effective possible. Really excited for that. So a couple of young guys, obviously, rookie, year two player, veteran that maybe is not longed for this team going forward, but in the short term could be as big of an impact player as we could have, and the expectation should be high for him. So a bit of a spectrum there in terms of guys I'm going to have some fun watching. And there'll be other players. And when Andy joins me throughout the rest of this week, we'll highlight additional guys that we're interested in from a season standpoint. And then specifically, as we drill down Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, we're going to be talking about the matchup with Dallas, where we think the Giants can win and where certain players need to win if the Giants want to get that week one, well, call it an upset because they are going to be underdogs, even being at home, and kick off this 2023 season in a big way. If you are over on YouTube right now for the live stream, feel free to jump in with your comments. Are there sleepers coming into this season that you're interested or excited about? We're not quite getting fully into the Dallas matchup just yet, but feel free to throw out guys that you think could have a big impact in that game, and we'll bring that back around as we work our way through the week. The other news, just to touch on here to make sure we round out the coverage, is obviously with Daniel Jones. First reported by ESPN, the team converted $8.42 million of Jones' base salary into a signing bonus, which created $6.315, very specific numbers, $1 million in cap space. And the initial numbers were going to be $21.75 for Daniel Jones this year, going up to 45, 39.5, and 56 million. And now the restructure makes it down to 15.4 million this upcoming year and kicks obviously some of that cost down the road. We'll take a look, as it's also mentioned here over on the Daily News. The Giants only had 4.7 million in space as of Monday morning, which is why they needed some room. They're using Jones' contract, not Leonard Williams' team high $32.3 million cap hit, because Jones' future here is obviously more of a certainty. So you never want to be kicking the money down, as we talked about Leonard Williams and that contract before. But the thing that Andy and I always debated was, if you kick that money down the road and then that player is no longer here, the dead money impact is obviously still going to loom large. So you always, backing down the money here, if we take a look at it, and I'll see if they have over on some of the cap pages right now. Do we have it set up? 2023. Yeah, so they've adjusted it now. His numbers now look like this over the 4 years. And interestingly enough, 15.4 this year, so they brought that down. 47.1 next season will be the cap hit, and that's coming off of the previous of 45. So the number doesn't change too much in the next season, 39.5 and 56.5 going forward. We see those numbers marginally move up by about 2.5 million each year, just correlating. So they spread it out equally across it. Guaranteed salary next season is going to be $36 million as well. So next year's the big one. No guaranteed salary going into 2025 and 2026. We said this repeatedly. They do have this out, not just with Daniel Jones, but with so much of this team and this roster that'll be really interesting to watch there. So that's how it broke down. But as an additional footnote, over the cap currently has the Giants sitting here at having just over 800,000 in cap room, which makes it interesting in terms of the functional, because at least by ESPN's reporting and by Daily News, they freed up a little bit more. Probably going to have to do something else here just to get the fully functional cap space that they want to have going into the season. And it does tie me back around to a guy like Gray and thinking about the running back room and where they stand with a guy like Matt Breida, who does have some money tied up in him and does represent, I think, some cap freedom. It's just a matter of where is your confidence level in a rookie, in a Gary Brightwell, being a part of that backup room. We go ahead and just give you the quick note here. Matt Breida is, and you think about it now, he's only making 1.15. You've got 500 and 900 in the dead cap savings, respectively. Although, were they to perform at June 1, which is where we be living right now, then you'd be talking about, same numbers. So going to be the same numbers that you're going to get there. Maybe that's not a big enough chunk of change to really warrant doing it. Shout out to Tim. How are you, man? Happy Labor Day to everybody. Didn't do it at the top. Happy Labor Day. Yeah, that's also a part of what's going on here. And sometimes when you cover multiple teams and multiple sports, Labor Day, you lose sight of it. Although I will say, I'm going to check out a great concert later at PNC in New Jersey with my father, with my girlfriend. We're going to go see a little James Taylor. we're going to go ahead and keep it casual here on Labor Day and enjoy some light, soft tunes to continue our week as we head into September. The other thing then for me that we wanted to touch on here before we get quickly out the door, and hopefully everyone's enjoying their Labor Day, is we're going to go ahead and look over now at the fantasy world, at FanDuel, and a couple of things from a Giants perspective, but also from a league-wide perspective too. I'm really interested to see the way some things break down here from a Giants standpoint, and then also from an NFC standpoint. There's some really fascinating, at least for me, there are some really fascinating possibilities when we look at the NFL. And let's just start there for fun, because I said I'm not going to be a guy that goes overboard here when it comes to some of the parlays that I ran last season. So some friendly money that I might put a couple bucks on in the NFC. And specifically, we'll just let you know, obviously, that in the NFC East, the Giants are plus 700 to win the division. You got Dallas 175 and minus 115 for the Eagles. I wouldn't put my money down. This is me already starting to playing a little bit smarter. The plus 700, not worth it for me for the Giants, because I think that's a big mountain to climb getting over top of the Eagles. But if you turn your attention over to the NFC North, the Detroit Lions are plus 145. The Vikings are plus 260. But my sleeper in that division is the Green Bay Packers. If Jordan Love comes out and has a solid season, and they've got Christian Watson, a fan favorite of mine, and the defense is stronger than maybe we're reminding ourselves, knowing where they were. They had a disappointing year last year, but they added some functional pieces, and I think that this could be a team that is more competitive post Aaron Rodgers than people are anticipating. I think they've taken the bump down because Aaron Rodgers is gone. That's totally reasonable. But at plus 350, I would take them as a little speculative bet in the NFC North if I'm just looking for something fun that could actually probably hit, because I think that's going to be a really competitive division too. Is Detroit ready to be the clear-cut favorite? Is Minnesota still needing to improve that defense, though they've added some things? I just look at it as being much more up for grabs than people may want. NFC South, already seeing this trend here. So the plus 130 for the Saints to take it, but the plus 210, I would take the Atlanta Falcons right now as well. They were my sleeper team coming into this offseason. They have so many weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Desmond Ridder, if you watch the show going back to his draft class, I was interested and excited about him. I think him coming into year number 2 is going to be good for them as well. I would take them to get the division there. And frankly, if you want to throw the money on the Saints, why not? Team I wouldn't touch in that division, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Although I am pretty surprised, plus 360 for Carolina seems like a low number. I wouldn't touch it because it's far too low. But they have a lot of things that they need to prove if they want to get across that line there. Other than that, Seattle at plus 200 out west is somewhat interesting behind the San Francisco 49ers, but I expect them to be on top. Really interesting, though. So get in the comments here, specifically around the NFC North, maybe, if that's your bag. But I would take a look at the Green Bay Packers if that was me. Other ones, let's flip our attention now inside of, if we can do, let's do some, why don't we do a little season awards, maybe? That could be interesting. And actually, let's talk about real quick here. Before we even talk about season awards, let's also talk about the records for some of these teams too, because that's one that I'm very interested in, especially for the New York Football Giants. Win totals over on FanDuel look like this, and I find this always to be interesting, right? Because a team to win 10 games or more, everybody basically, you got to put up extra money for Kansas City, Philadelphia, Cincinnati. I probably would not put minus 300 on Cincinnati to win 10 games or more. Again, competitive division, questions around Joe Burrow with the injury in the offseason. I wouldn't automatically chalk them up for that. You could see a lot of teams that have 10 wins in that division, but I probably wouldn't do the minus 300. Yeah, not going to be there for me. Buffalo is in minus money, as is Baltimore. Jacksonville, that makes a lot of sense based on that division. You're going to have to spend more to make more there. But as you get down all the way to the New York Football Giants, plus 290. Again, probably worth it here. I wouldn't bet them for the division, but I would take the chance here that if you come out and beat Dallas week 1, the ball starts rolling on expectations of games that you think you can win. And that's what it's going to come down to. Did they go into their schedule and effectively say, we can go ahead and get 1 or 2 upsets over the course of our season, and that sets us up for a lot of success. And we're not doing the win-loss here for the New York Football Giants, but if you get that win against Dallas, then you think about Arizona, and you think about a team like Seattle as being a very winnable game if you want to be competitive, and you circle those 2 matchups with Washington inside the division as well. So I'd throw a couple bucks over on that one too, for sure. Meanwhile, Green Bay, again, 10 wins is almost plus 200. I wouldn't go that far. Again, falls into the category. They're right there. Same number there in terms of value with Chicago. So I think it's a very, very fluid division in the North. Might not go too crazy in terms of them winning 10 games. Only long shot to win 10 games. That's a lot for me. Let's take a look. Rather than look at that, let's take a look at the New York Football Giants and where they stack up in terms of win totals this year on FanDuel, where we're talking about the over-under is set at 7.5. I would comfortably take the over on that. No guarantee, but again, minus 104 and minus 118 for the over-under. So it's not like you're really getting anything too sexy from that standpoint. But I would take, for example, the under. This would be an interesting one. Go back to the North. The under on 8.5 for the Minnesota Vikings. Them going 8-9 plus 104 might take a flyer on that. The Jets right now going into this season, over under is set at 9.5. Again, could they go 9-8 plus 100? Yes. These are like these little money bets that I really, really like. And then the Steelers would be another one. The over under set at 8.5 there. Again, I think they're a potential surprising team. Kenny Pickett in year number 2, plus 120 there. So there's some good stuff that I'm interested in when it comes to the over-under for win totals in the New York Football Giants. Only other stuff that you can tell me whether or not you think this is particularly interesting, intriguing, exciting. There's some good ones that I was certainly curious about. And I'm going to pull up and let's just go 100% New York Giants specific here to close out the show, because it's going to give us a ton of things when we're thinking about where this team could land. So if we pull up, try to get our New York Football Giants set up here. Yes, American football. A little bit of a navigation here. New York Football Giants against the Dallas Cowboys right now are plus 3.5, minus 115, plus 140 on the money line. That's all well and good. But what I really like, if we go back into the NFL here, there's some good player stats that I actually think are fun. So let's take a look at player props and where some of these guys stack up. Daniel Jones. So the over 30 plus regular season passing touchdowns, I would not touch he's plus 750, but that's a big number. I don't think that I need that to be a part of what I'm going for here. However, the plus 750 regular season rushing yards, that's one that I could potentially get behind with a couple of different guys, both Giants and otherwise. Daniel Jones, it's not about Saquon Barkley here, even though I expect him certainly to do it. He's minus 420. So that's why you don't really care about that number per se. But the Daniel Jones plus 200 on going over 750, yes, I would throw some money down on that as well. If you want to go Saquon Barkley, over on the 1,250 rushing yards, because the 1,000 isn't that enticing, he's plus 340 to go over the 1,250 mark. If you think that this is going to be a big rushing year for him, you can certainly go that route. Getting over 1,000 is minus 115. Safe bet. So I'm not going crazy, as I talked about, but I would probably, if you want to speculate, plus 340 to go over 1,250, sure. I would also love to get my hands on an all-purpose yards here, but I don't have that up here, at least in front of me at the moment. 6+ rushing touchdowns or 8+ rushing touchdowns becomes kind of interesting here. The numbers on Saquon Barkley are low to start, but they get pretty good pretty fast. Minus 320 when we talk about being over 6. When you move into the over 8 category, though, then you get a minus 125. So again, how bullish are you on what Saquon Barkley is going to be for this offense this season, specifically on the ground? We know through the air is going to be big too. 10+ touchdowns plus 195. Guys ahead of him, by the way, minus 180 on Jalen Hurts for 10 plus touchdowns. And then other guys, notable holdouts that had contract things going on. Josh Jacobs is plus 125 to go over 10 as well. So there's a few interesting things from that standpoint. The other receiving props that I think are funny to look at here. You have all your usual suspects. By the way, if you think that 750 yards is a respectable benchmark, and we know there's a lot of Giants that we talk about, can Darius Slayton get there? Can maybe a rookie like Jalen Hyatt? How high do we want to set the bar for him? And then we'll tap into some of these. We'll tap into some of these comments here as well before we close out. When you look at it, though, minus 9,000 for Justin Jefferson to be over 750 yards, because of course he's going to be. But even just compare that to a Jamar Chase, minus 3,500, right? So it still is an insanely different barometer when we talk about Justin Jefferson and everybody else. If you wanted to take one that costs you money to make money, Amon-Ra St. Brown minus 480. That's a very easy one for me there, obviously, to put some money on. But looking through for anybody coming off the New York Football Giants, there's not a ton. Really, really nice ones that cost you to make it. Mark Andrews, minus 145. I think that offense is ready for him, especially to explode with the additions of OBJ. You got Zay Flowers there as well now. It's going to open things up more for them. I also like George Pickens, minus 145. I think that, again, that team and some of these players are ready to take a big step forward here. The 1,000-yard mark, unfortunately, as I scroll through, we're not going to get a lot of New York Football Giants put into this mix here. But if I was going to throw some down, how about Calvin Ridley plus 155? That one would be a really good one for me. And I'll tap right back to that NFC North, to the Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson plus 180 would be a good one as well. That being the case, fun, good stuff here. A few different things to take a look at. One last thing that we could say would be anybody in the sack category. Let's just flip over to the defensive side of the ball here for this one and let you know, who do we have up on the docket? Kayvon Thibodeau is plus 440 to have 10 or more sacks. It's a very big number. I wish, though I do not see up on this board right now, an Azeez Ojulari. If I can get numbers on him, and you could look for an 8 sacks, something a little bit more modest. But if you can find some numbers on him, that would be one that I would throw on, because I think he's the beneficiary of year number 2 for Kayvon Thibodeau, the beneficiary of Dexter Lawrence, of Leonard Williams being in there as well. Checking it out here before we close ourselves out. Thank you for being a part of the live here. Hope you're enjoying your Labor Day and having a good time out there. Cy Guy Bry, Thomas, welcome into the conversation as well. I'm ready for football that counts. You're gosh darn right we are, right? Get the Giants going here. Thomas says Giants at 9-8. I don't think that's unreasonable, and we'll probably feather some of these in here. I want to make sure I do it with Andy. That'll be on tomorrow's episode more than likely. But I'll say that the 9-win mark might be where I'm living right now. It comes down to the division. It comes down to how you start this season off. You cannot, win or lose an entire season in one game. But for a team that has struggled to get division wins, yes, right? When you're 1-5-1 a year ago, including the playoffs against the Eagles, you got to find a way, right? If you think you're truly ready to win, then sweeping the sweeping Washington needs to be a part of what you do here. Then splitting with Dallas matters here, right? Going 500 in the division needs to be a baseline if we're thinking about where this team can go. So there's some other things that we want to talk about as we move along. Expectations. We'll do some over-under stuff just personally, not just off of FanDuel, but where we think this team is going to go, where Daniel Jones is going to perform. And then, as I mentioned, if you joined us late, we have Coach Ed, Coach G. We'll have all the information over on our social, on Twitter at One Giant Podcast. Going to have him come on, talk about Trey Hawkins, talk about Deonte Banks, technique, how they'll be executing against Dallas, why that can benefit the New York Football Giants. And then on the flip side, Evan Neal, Smith Jr. Those are the 4 guys, 2 offensive, 2 defensive, that we went and took a look at here heading into week number 1. Those are going to come out throughout the course of this week, maybe Wednesday and Thursday. I'm not sure, but it'll be kind of additional bonus content. So on top of our shows, you'll also get some of these extra level insights that we're hoping to do throughout the course of this season. So be sure to check all of that out as well. Man, if I had to put my stamp down right now and tell you what I think the Giants are going to do here, so official, I could wait all the way until the end of the week before I break it down. But if I were to say where I think the Giants are going to land this season, let me chalk it up in my head. 3, 4, 5. Uh-huh. Eh. Yeah, I got them at 9-8, but I think 10-7 is very much on the table. It just requires to perform well in some key matchups throughout this season, ones where they are going to be underdogs, and the Giants will be underdogs for a number of these games, and that's going to include opening the season here against Dallas. It's going to include it when they go on the road in week 3 against San Francisco. They'll probably be slight underdogs against Seattle. Miami would be the first one maybe to look at there after obviously week number 2 against the Arizona Cardinals. And one final note for you. Go check out PSF Pro Sports Fans. I'll give you this information again throughout this week. I'm going to be joining a couple of great Giants content coverage. We're going to be doing live watch parties over on that app. You'll be able to interact with us. We'll be doing some exclusive content over on that platform as well. So that's all going to be ramping up middle of this week, going into the game against Dallas. And then I'm going to have about half the games throughout the course of this year where you can go ahead and do a little bit of watch party, not game commentary, not, X's and O's, just having fun, where you guys will get a chance to come up with us. So we'll break that down a little bit cleaner for you as we move along as well. Woo! Go enjoy your Labor Day. It's officially practice week. It's officially game week for the New York Football Giants. So we'll continue to break it down all this week. Thanks for joining us, on this impromptu live on YouTube. Get us on the podcast feed at Adam Armbrecht, at AndyMac214 on Twitter, and at One Giant Podcast. Until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know, as always, let's go Big Blue.